Hey, I'm Ethan, and although I'm not 100% done with the game, I wanted to go ahead and talk about the Final Fantasy VII Remake while it's still somewhat relevant. First off, I have actually beat it, contrary to what I just said. I'm just doing multiple playthroughs to complete it entirely because I'm just having that much fun with the game. Currently, I've put about, 69 hours in 3 weeks, and I still have more to do in the game due to the amount of content that it has. So let's start with the story. It's set in a futuristic yet fantasy-like universe, sort of like sci-fi meets fantasy. Yeah, that's why it's Final Fantasy. You play as Cloud Strife, an ex-soldier, which is like an elite member of the Shinra army. Shinra is this massive corporation that has complete control over the city of Midgar, with the people's support. Midgar is powered by Mako energy, the lifeblood of the planet, and as Shinra sucks up more Mako, the planet is slowly dying. This is where Avalanche comes in. They're an extremist group dedicated to saving the planet and taking down Shinra. The game starts with Avalanche hiring Cloud to help blow up a Mako reactor, and that's about all I'll tell, because there are several mysteries and unexplained events like Cloud's backstory. For the most part, all the characters in the game are really likable, and there's a lot of emphasis on building relationships and making you emotionally connect with the characters. It works well in most cases, but a few of the side characters are either really underdeveloped, just there for comic relief, or weird and annoying. The dialogue for the main story quest is great, but interactions with some of the aforementioned side characters is a bit poorly written. For example, one of the members of Avalanche, Jessie, has a crush on Cloud, and every time the game makes her say anything of that nature, it just comes across as unnatural. But bad dialogue is frankly a very minor issue, and thankfully it's the biggest issue that the game has, in my opinion. One thing to note about the remake is that it covers about the first 5 hours in the original game, and expands it into a 35 to 40 hour long story. It's sort of like a director's cut of the game almost, with lots more expansion on the smaller details. I'll go through all the chapters and say how much they expanded it. About the same, greatly expanded, entirely new, greatly expanded, entirely new, a little bit longer, starts off the same but has an open world bit. Huge expansion here. This part was one screen originally and turned into a full hour-long chapter, ditto for Chapter 11. 12 was greatly expanded, 13 is entirely new. This chapter is the same situation as Chapter 8. Again, this is one or two screens turned into a large chapter. This is a bit closer in length to the original. This chapter is super long and was only about 30 minutes originally, and finally Chapter 18 was about a 5-minute minigame in the original, now a 10-minute minigame and a slew of cutscenes and bosses. So yeah, quite the expansion. But I still recommend playing the original first so you can appreciate the details and work that was put into this remake to make certain scenes as accurate as possible. Hell, I was still smiling and going, that's exactly how it was in the original, 60 hours in. And there were dozens of moments like that throughout my experience. You can pick up the original Final Fantasy VII in HD on just about every modern console for like $10. Trust me, it's worth it. Although, you may not like the turn-based combat. And if you don't, then luckily for you, the remake ditched that and went over to a more action-centered combat, which I personally like better. The combat itself may be simple, but the enemies and their numerous resistances and weaknesses make it not mindless button mashing. It also looks really cool, even with fights against small enemies. Check out this clip here.
Stay strong.
All the time. It's on now. Now. Let's do this. Get serious. Nothing personal. Hey Tifa, you alright?
Guess I might have held you back some, huh?
Another thing that makes the combat more complex is materia, a feature that returns from the original. Materia are items that do a variety of functions based on their color. Green materia gives you a spell, like healing, fire, or poison. Blue pairs with a green materia to do things like amplify its damage, give you resistance to a certain element, have your weapon do elemental damage, and a lot more. Yellow gives you a new ability, like being able to assess an enemy and see its stats and weaknesses, or boosting the rate at which your special attacks recharge. Purple materia is typically used for things like boosting your maximum health or magic, but it has a few miscellaneous usage. Finally, there's red materia, which can be used to summon godlike creatures to help you in certain battles. What materia you put on what characters drastically changes how you play the game and adds a huge element of thinking to the combat, as do all the weapons. Each character has about 7 weapons with advantages and disadvantages to each one, including incentives to use some for a certain period so you can get special abilities on other weapons. And each weapon has its own individual skill tree to upgrade as well. Just another layer of depth to seemingly simple combat. I could drone on and on about all the different ways to set up your characters, but that'd at least double this video's length. Now, let's talk about one thing that this game doesn't do well, and that's environmental textures. And if we're being nitpicky here, some of the physics. Take a look at this clip here. Watch as Cloud just pushes past huge I-beams and other items. I mean, I like that chairs and rocks get pushed, but there should be a limit. Now look at the background. Seems kind of low quality and sometimes even stays unrendered. But look how good the faces and hair are in comparison. It seems that they put all the graphics into characters and allowed the rest of the world to look just okay. Oh, and for some reason the characters can jump like 80 feet in a battle. Just another thing that kind of irks me, but not enough to really mind too much. I can ignore things like that. But what I can't ignore is the music, because it is just so damn good. The soundtrack absolutely slaps. I swear, every week a new track is stuck in my head. I found myself humming the final boss theme while doing chores the other day. Point is, the soundtrack better win at the Game Awards this year, or I'll be kinda pissed. You can also find music discs with reimagined tracks from the original game and play them at jukeboxes around Midgar. A nice touch if you ask me. Final Fantasy VII Remake is an amazing reimagining of the 1997 classic and is a must-play for any fan of single-player games. It's got memorable characters with lots of depth to the story and beautiful attention to detail on just character models. Unfortunately, not all the characters are likable and have some bad lines, but what can you do? The combat is fun to both set up and execute, and the collection of unique bosses the game throws at you will keep you on your toes. This remake is a great standalone game, but is made even better by having experienced the original. I give it a final score of a 9 out of 10. I'll leave you to watch the rest of the boss fight gameplay in the background, but for now,
See ya. Taking over. Incoming. Gotta move. Get some rest.